The morning had started out peacefully, the kind of day that reminded me why I had chosen to keep the lake cabin in the family for so many years. The water outside stretched like polished glass, reflecting the pine trees on the far bank with perfect clarity, and the soft call of loons carried across the misty surface. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of fresh coffee and cedar wood, the sort of aroma that could make even the most serious meeting feel less formal. Sitting across from me at the sturdy oak table was Judge Michael Evans, a U.S. District Judge, whose reputation for fairness and precision was known far beyond our county lines. He had agreed to meet me here away from the noise of courtrooms and offices, to quietly review the growing stack of complaints and legal actions against the local HOA, an organization whose reach had stretched far beyond its legal limits. In recent years, we had just begun sorting through a folder thick with affidavits when the moment that changed everything came crashing through the door. Literally, without a knock, without so much as a pause, the door burst open, and there she was, Karen. The face and voice of the HOA, infamous for her relentless enforcement of rules and her unshakable belief that her clipboard carried the weight of federal law. She stood there with her hair frozen stiff in a cloud of hairspray, lips pressed so tight they looked like a single red line, and a thick folder tucked under her arm as though she were storming into a courtroom to deliver the final verdict. Didn't even glance at me before slamming the folder down on the table, her eyes flashing with indignation as she barked, "This cabin is out of compliance with community regulations, and I demand you vacate immediately." The words rang through the cabin, absurd in their authority, but she didn't pause long enough for either of us to respond. She rattled on, listing supposed infractions with the speed of a prosecutor. The cabin siding wasn't painted too HOA approved. Colors the dock stretched too far into the lake. The woodpile stacked by the shed wasn't aesthetically appropriate. And, most offensive of all, I was harboring unauthorized guests. Her finger jabbed the air with every accusation, each movement sharp and self-righteous, as though she truly believed her words could bulldoze decades of ownership and private property rights. I sat back in my chair, half stunned and half amused, resisting the urge to interrupt, because I knew something she didn't. The man she had just interrupted, the one she dismissed as an unauthorized guest, was not just some friend stopping by for coffee. He was a sitting U.S. District Judge, with the power to dismantle her HOA's overreach piece by piece in federal court. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the judge slowly raise an eyebrow, setting his pen neatly on the table as he leaned back to watch her. His expression calm but sharp, like a man who had seen this kind of arrogance 1,000 times before. The weight of his silence seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. Yet Karen, oblivious to the storm she had just walked into, plowed ahead with her tirade. She circled the table like a warden inspecting prisoners, pointing at the papers we had spread out as though they were contraband. Her voice rose louder with every sentence, filling the cabin with shrill declarations of bylaws and fines, till the absurdity of it all was almost comical. Here she was, barging into private property without permission, trying to throw her flimsy rulebook around in front of the very man tasked with reviewing the mountain of federal complaints against her organization. It was arrogance at its peak. A blind confidence so thick she didn't even notice the way the judge's eyes narrowed slightly, the way his patience thinned with every word she spat, and as I sat there, letting her dig herself deeper into the hole she couldn't yet see, I knew it was only a matter of time before she realized who she had just stormed in hand. That moment was going to hit harder than any fine or citation she had ever slapped on her neighbors. Karen was still in mid-rant, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, when she turned her finger toward the judge as though he were just another trespasser caught in her net. "And you, whoever you are, need to know this entire property is subject to our bylaws." She snapped, her tone dripping with the false authority of someone who had never once been challenged. "Unauthorized guests are not permitted to occupy residences without approval from the HOA, and you are in direct violation by being here." She stood tall, chin raised, waiting for him to stammer an excuse or defer to her as so many in the neighborhood had learned to do. Instead, Judge Evans leaned back in his chair, folded his hands calmly on the table, and fixed her with a stare so steady that the room itself seemed too quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, deliberate, and heavy, with the kind of authority that did not need to be raised to be felt. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I am a United States District Judge currently overseeing multiple federal complaints against your homeowners association." The words landed like a hammer. Karen blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing without sound, the crimson color rising in her cheeks as her self-assurance drained away. The judge continued, not unkindly, but with the precision of a man cutting through all pretense. "You have barged into a private residence without permission, disrupted a confidential federal discussion, and attempted to enforce authority. You do not lawfully possess." That alone could be construed as trespassing, harassment, and interference with a federal proceeding. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the faint creak of the dock outside as the water lapped against its posts. Karen shifted from foot to foot, her earlier fire crumbling into nervous stammers. She muttered something about misunderstandings in doing her duty, but the judge raised a single hand, and the sound died in her throat. He slid one of the thick case files across the table and tapped the header with his finger, his eyes never leaving hers. Bold black letters read, "HOA Mismanagement and Harassment Complaint. Federal Case No. 2146. Karen's eyes widened, and I saw the exact moment she realized that the very organization she ruled with an iron fist was under the kind of scrutiny she could never bully her way out of. The judge's tone sharpened slightly, each word deliberate and unyielding. "You will leave this property immediately. You will strongly consider how this incident will appear when you are called to testify. Because make no mistake, ma'am, this will come up in court." The confidence she had stormed in with was gone, placed by the twitchy movements of someone desperate to retreat without tripping over her own pride. She backed toward the door, words now little more than nervous mumbles about needing to check with the board, but neither of us responded. When she finally slipped outside and slammed the door behind her, the echo seemed more desperate than defiant. The judge, completely composed, adjusted the papers back into a neat stack, poured himself another cup of coffee, and turned back to me as though nothing had happened. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he said dryly, "Well, that should simplify the proceedings." I let out the laugh I had been holding back, the absurdity of the moment finally breaking into relief. Outside, the lake sparkled under the rising sun, serene and untouched by the storm that had just raged inside. Karen had come in swinging the weight of her imagined authority, but she had walked out exposed, smaller and silenced by a power she couldn't bend or bully. That instant, I knew the days of her unchecked reign over the neighborhood were numbered. And for the first time in years, the lake cabin felt like the safest place in the world.